again in studio. This time about safety, but also how new things are not important. To understand 18th century is not that simple, especially if you think or mention electronics. Sure, the women's and female population should not use electronics too much, but for sure it is quite difficult if you think that in electronic magazine there are millions of different ledgers and devices mentioned. Of course, also women can use some simple electronics, especially those made for kitchens, to understand different home around the world, those that are very poor designed and those very luxury designed. It's not a simple thematic. To understand fashion, beauty, and health, it is very, very difficult, especially because people focus on fashion about money, beauty together with money, and health related to money. To think about United States of America or different forms of health there, you should also think about how to lose some fats or how not to eat in very, very expensive restaurants. Maybe the rice is solution or some good potato made at home or at your friend's place. To understand different editors together with my book, but also my friends, it's not easy. But also to understand the positions we have in United Kingdom, but nothing is really united when it comes to book. For sure, different people can purchase my products, but you should also understand that beauty sectors in book are not simple, especially if you think that also France is very, very difficult. Also in France, people use a lot of English, so there is also some sort of France English forum, definitely in richer realms. To understand different forms of Britain and United States, there are some differences, also together with authors. Of course, if you are more elite authors, you will be translated in United States simple language of English, but also in some forms of British elegant English. To understand Elle magazine and what forum it have together with models, you could also easier to understand elegance in Spain and those elegances in France, also some in Europe. To understand more known models and that those are not very important, especially not for old people or those that are 60 plus, you'll understand how much it's important to invest in health topics. The health topics are not only modeling. The health topics are actually building and employing different forms of company and stocks, but also to understand different forms how me spending on charity and in media. To share some simple contents can build better charity. But in life, it is also very, very important to solve different forms of syndrome that modern age have. To understand different forms of GN, it's also not simple because that's also the cure. Analyzing the ill and the whole structure of medicine is not easy. They have the website ill France, illcom, and ill no, illrs, illuk.com, and www.ill.com UK. Also the illCZ and illCOID, and also illin. To understand those forms of publishing rights, it's also not simple. And if you think that there are also Chinese, Croatian, English, German, Indonesian, Italian, Romanian, Serbian, and Slovene Spanish, Thai Turkish, and Vietnam language together with ill, you'll see how giant that magazine is. To understand different forms of web fashion photorealism, you also can think about especially if you are some sort of editor or partner of some models. You can see how difficult the fashion media is and how to protect different picture or actually to build a better, more quality media with less media. To understand the fiction of realism from that point, it is very, very difficult. Sometimes about picture, humans should have more objectivity, or in some different months more value about picture in technology. To understand that type of attribution also in crisis is very important because people could sense better value in themselves. The journalism, of course, it's not easy, especially not in schools, because they actually are the best critics of the author books in America or in Europe. To understand business in schools, it is the most complicated. The mentors and teachers are the same thing, but sometimes the mentors are more expensive because they have much more quality. It's the same with simple forms of modeling and arts. The environments around America are very, very difficult when it comes to modeling, especially if involved in science or any form of safe sport. The safety is very important, and you should actually be aware how difficult the medicine is in America or in Europe. Sometimes people think that medicine are different forms of technology, but of course that's incorrect. To understand that therapy is also some sort of medicine, but also the Taoism and simple forms of elegance. The entertainment is unsafe until on every concert there is millions of different guards. The guards are also important and they can build better orders together with safety. To understand advocacy, but also the analytics in safety, it's not easy, especially not the analytics in blogging. That might be completely wrong. To understand broadcasting in modeling, it's very, very difficult, but sometimes the citizens do not realize that models are very, very important part of community, sometimes even related to health levels. To explain different forms of gold, it's also not easy, but also how gold actually connect with some sort of physical technology. To understand digital photography or different forms of safety online is not easy, but also different forms of impressions. People in journalism, those are sometimes extreme critics. Also, the critics about authors or the critics about non-profit organizations. There are also photojournalism and different forms of peace that are in Taoism but also around the world, in Europe and in America. It is very important to understand different forms of simple press, but also to sense different forms of treats that are on the web or in underground. To understand the visual forms in life, it's not easy, but also to understand different forms of propagandas that are under 26. If you're thinking about modeling under 26, that's completely unreal when it comes to money. Probably it would be more like TV fiction series of models under 26. Some sort of very, very fantasy form of fiction or fans of books. To understand different forms of bloggers under 26, those are some sort of illusions, especially in any form of money terms. To understand different forms of editors, it's not easy, but also to build better comments on different forms of photos. Sometimes the fashion it's very, very difficult, but it beats together with different forms of universe. To understand different forms of criticism made by adults, it's also important sometimes, but another time very, very unimportant. The political leaders usually choose to become simple form of fashion, but nothing more. Very, very difficult if you think about American Vogue or international different forms of authors or models. To think about everything and how to improve all those forms, it's not easy. If you think about simple forms of capitalism, but that's not the main forum. Sometimes it's better to build a fashion block. Sometimes it's better to build simple fashion capital. And sometimes it's better to become designer. But if you are already designer, then you should actually respect that type of simple blessing. The awards for people under 26 are also important because they also usually do some simple show for those that are older. To understand fashion photography in life it's not easy, but also the fashion of laws that usually beats together with different forms of elegance or stock sets. There is also fast fashion crisis that also sometimes mentioned on different radios, and that's why people sometimes should actually ignore different forms of radio when there are different forms of super crisis. Of course, in finance, always there is some crisis, and people have problems. To understand different forms of ceremony in easy, it's not easy, especially not in British culture. To understand different forms of cultures, it's not easy, but you should consider that in life everything is chaotic sense. If you have that chaotic sense in life, then maybe you could actually succeed. If you have too much order in your life, probably you are going to fail a lot. To build fashionable, simple hairstyle, it's also not easy, but also to understand simple Taoism culture, but not more. If you are trying to become more superior or more model, you might lose all the sense about what is really natural or what is really simply important in life. To become more and more influential, sometimes it's very good, but on the other time, it just brings the minus. To understand traditional forms in clothing in British realms it's not easy, but also to understand different forms of conditions that applies together with social circumstance in fashion. The activity of people under 26 are usually very hard work and very heavy forms of book. So those are traditionally very under pressure. 365. Under 26, the condition is also to follow me or to subscribe to those Simple Life movie. And with that, you can actually become a better person. To understand different forms of life, it's not easy, but also to become better person, it's not easy. And sometimes in life, we do not need more people to follow us, but we only must build better scene for ourselves or how we would actually look in very professional films or professional life. To understand those clothing, especially with future of me, it's not easy. In life, it is not easy to understand chaos. The chaos is some sort of tradition also when it comes to law or when it comes to fashion. In fashion, there are always different forms of chaotic forms, but also millions of different forms of hats, different forms of clothing, and simple forms of clothing for the legs, also the clothings and styles for the upper part of body, but also the clothing style for lower part of body. Of course, in life we also know the upper stocks and lower stocks, and all are very difficult when it comes to different forms of popular exchanges. To understand millions of different jackets around Britain is not easy, but also the jackets around America. In Europe, the jackets are also simple, but some sort of television. To understand philosophy in life, it's not easy, but also to understand different forms of style that appears in chaos. The chaos also exists in bigger cities, and while people try to explain different forms of money or smart finance or fashion, you will only find chaos in your life. If you think that under pressure or work you are going to find some simple order, In few years you actually figured out that everything was made from chaos, like this simple film. It is actually the style of life. The life is complicated, but sometimes life is also simple if you have some chaos elegance. The chaos elegance is very, very difficult, but it's not easy to understand the safety in it. The chaos elegance is also self therapy. It means a lot of simple chaos in film life, but also a lot of safety and a lot of safety with elegance. The safety with elegance is very, very important. But if you build the proper chaos, you'll actually find a little bit more order in it. That's kind of strange. Sometimes life is also strange, but to build better life, better elegance, sometimes chaos, and sometimes simple film form, you'll find a lot of elegance in life and a lot of very, very difficult made fortune.